Hello and welcome to the Forest School podcast. If you are watching this episode, then something that I wanted to happen has already happened. If you are watching this either on YouTube or you are watching it on Spotify, and look, just behind me, look at this cheeky guy. What is this squirrel doing? Here you go. So if you are watching this, I wanted to make up a little bit because Wem is currently having some more of her infusions, which means that she isn't able to make the podcast. Also wasn't able to make it last week, which is why we didn't have an episode out. Massive thanks to everybody that's sending all these messages of support to Wem and to the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Wem is more than halfway through her treatment now, which means that we are now already starting to put dates in. We've already booked in a couple of guests for when Wem is back and at 100% again. But for today, it's just me. So I've set it up here so that you can see me not just on this camera, but this camera. It is the jankiest setup you can possibly imagine. I can't take a picture of it because one of the cameras is my phone. But I have my laptop balanced on 3 wooden benches just stacked up on top of each other. I've got a torch pointed at me because I'm under the parachute, which was giving me like just either dark or I look like Shrek. The whole thing was making me look green. So I've pointed it here. I've got this camera over here, which is my phone. And behind me, we've got our bird feeder. So if you want to watch, you can see the birds coming in and out as I chat. And also down on this table behind me, I imagine some squirrel. Oh, there he is under the table. Look, there you go. So if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, there's some extra stuff for you to watch. If you're not watching it on YouTube, go watch it on YouTube because then we get some ad money and that's great for us. So, yeah. But, what do I need to say in terms of updates? Well, of course, as always, massive thanks to anyone that's supporting us on Patreon. We've had a couple of new people join. When new people join, they get a handwritten postcard from us. And it's some really nice artwork to go up. So, as well as our thanks. Oh, the squirrel is getting very close to me. Hey, bud. You are so chunky. Oh, my God. Chunky, chunky boy. It's going to come for my foot. What are you doing? Oh, okay. He's just picked up. Oh, I wish I could turn the camera around so you could see it. He's literally just over there. Stay focused, Lewis. This is what happens when it's just me. Massive thanks to everyone that's on Patreon. We really appreciate it. We're sending out little handwritten things. And also, just as a little peek behind the curtain, Wem and I are looking at setting up some kind of exclusive video content in a CPD kind of way. We realized that there is a little niche that we found in terms of CPD video, and we think we are going to test that with people that are on our Patreon first of all. So if you want to be first to have a look and kind of get a look at these like beta testings of the videos that Wem and I are putting together as a little CPD course, then please do jump onto Patreon. The support massively helps the podcast. It helps keep the stuff like this going. I realize that is difficult to say without Wem here, but we do both feel hugely grateful for everyone that's supporting us over there. It's still December, which means you can still order your Magic in the Mud t-shirts. We are taking orders. We've still got orders coming in right up to the end of December, and then we'll be shipping those out in January. So if you want to give yourself a little treat in January, head to our website and you can find the Magic in the Mud t-shirts. Limited. We're not doing them again. This is it. Then they're done. And again, any profits from that really like help support the podcast and keep it going so that we can keep doing this kind of thing. Please keep your eyes out in this episode. We've got a couple of new sponsors for the Forest School podcast, so stay tuned for that. And again, both of those have lovely videos, edits to go along with them. So please do watch this wherever you can, on Spotify, on YouTube. If you're just listening to it because you're driving, that's absolutely great. But maybe when you get home, you want to go, oh, what was Lewis banging on about with those? Look at him. There he is. As if on cue. There it is. Apologies for people that are just listening to this. There's going to be, as old school as it may seem, there's going to be a lot of references to me going, look, there's an animal that is doing its thing. But enough waffling about squirrels. The Forest School podcast is proudly sponsored by Tensile. As Forest School leaders, Wem and I know how important it is to provide a space where children can regulate their emotions and get the sensory input they need, even in challenging weather. We've always loved using hammocks for their calming, swaying motion, but let's be honest, they're no good in wind, rain, or snow. That's why we're so excited about the Tensile Stingray. It's completely weatherproof and offers all the benefits of a hammock while keeping everyone warm, dry, and comfortable. We've had kids use the Stingray in all kinds of weather, wind, rain, and even snow, and it's become a favourite place for them to warm up, re-engage, and find calm. With a 400 kilo weight limit, it's incredibly sturdy and provides plenty of space for kids to feel secure, while its no-sear mesh keeps out bugs, and the 5008H Rainfly handles even the heaviest downpours. Because it's elevated off the ground, the Stingray stays warm and dry even on frosty mornings. Plus, the gentle sway helps children self-regulate and reconnect with the group on their own terms. It's been a total game changer for our sessions, allowing us to provide an engaging and sensory-friendly retreat in all weather conditions. If you're looking for a durable, portable, and weatherproof solution, we can't recommend the Tensile Stingray enough. Use the referral code FORESTCHILDREN10 to get a 10% discount and support the podcast. Lewis, let's get into today's episode. I have recently read, or should say listened to, the book Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. If you don't know Rory Sutherland, he is kind of doing the rounds in the last kind of 6 months, 12 months on podcasts. He is a bit of an advertising guru, a bit of a online, positioning himself as an alternative thinker, somebody that's kind of challenging lots of perceptions, and he is somebody that's I found of interest. And this episode kind of is going to focus on maybe slightly more of the businessy side of running a forest school and the marketing side of things, and how does all of that stuff work alongside Rory's book Alchemy. So a big part of Rory's book is him talking about this idea of that we are using logic in what he would say is the wrong way. He talks about logic initially having been a method by which we understand the things in the world that we can already see happening. It was a retrospect. It was like a follow-on. We see this happens. Can we use logic to understand why it happens? And he is very pro that, and understands that is the way that kind of logic was intended, is possibly the wrong word. But he then talks about how that has kind of been corrupted, and that now more and more we are seeing people use logic preemptively in possibly ways that don't always yield the best results. Now, what he means by that is people trying to logically think about decisions, ideas, new plans, before that anything has happened, so that you are kind of guaranteeing to maybe higher ups, maybe to the people that are going to take part, you're guaranteeing that it's going to have a certain impact because you have used logic. Now, what he describes in the book is this kind of matrix of, along the top is kind of things we understand and things we don't understand, and down the side is things that work and things that don't work. And he is kind of talking about in this book dividing things into these 4 sections and going, there are things that work and we understand why they work. Nobody's questioning those things. That's not kind of newsworthy. And then he's talking about there are these things that they don't work and we understand why. And that's a good example of where logic has been useful. And then he talks about there are things that they don't work and we don't understand why. And then there are things in this 4th space, which things that work, but we don't understand why. And one of the examples that he gives is about bicycles, and that for a very long time, people didn't really understand the physics of why bikes stayed up. There wasn't an understanding. But that doesn't mean that people didn't ride bikes because they didn't logically understand how they work. And so that is kind of the thing that he is pushing for in this book, is kind of going, well, let's not use logic as a preemptive tool. Let's use it as a retrospective tool, because only through kind of experimentations with things that we're not sure if they're going to work, or they work but we don't understand them, that's where we are going to find all these kind of amazing breakthroughs and creative explanations for stuff. And I think that has real impact for forest school. It was one of the things that it really struck me that I was trying to equate this to different education systems, and thinking that kind of mainstream state classroom education is kind of one of those logic first systems, because there is, as much as they can, at least when I was a teacher, and teachers that I know now, this idea that like the better you can make your planning, the better you can understand what's going to happen before it happens, the better that delivery of that lesson's going to be, which is not necessarily untrue. But what that does mean is that we have removed any kind of options for, I'm going to call it like creative chaos. And I was thinking, okay, so how does that relate to forest school? And one of the big things I think the forest school has as an advantage, and this is where I think you could get into some nitty gritty about what kind of really different natural spaces can all be used for forest school, but what are the pros and cons of different natural spaces? And the more nature, the less urban a space is, potentially there is more, I think, scope for this what I'm about to talk about, which is like creative chaos. In that, if I were to plan games to happen on a school playground, a concrete rectangle, fences all the way around, the game that I plan, as long as people go along with it, will be the game that's planned. And so there's this kind of idea that like I've logicked it first and then seen what will happen afterwards. But this creative chaos element in forest school is this thing where like we have to shed some of that, because we have to be open to the idea that like this is what we're going to plan, and that may or may not get taken up. But not only that it may or may not get taken up, but that the natural environment will throw in creative chaos and will potentially give us things that work, but we don't understand why. Now, an example of that, the one that comes to mind first of all is like weather. And so there's all these other things, maybe you find a dead deer, maybe you find a crazy acorn patch or something. But let's take weather as an example. If I was thinking about the needs of a participant in one of my groups, and I knew they were potentially going through some trickier moments, let's say their social battery is very low. If I were in control of lots of the elements, then I think I would be inclined to logically go, what they need is a dry, still day so that they can engage with their peers. That's the logical thing to go, let's not have weather as an influencing factor. But I don't have that. And quite often there are those things where, then you have a day where it's really, really blowy or it absolutely chucks it down. And the rain and the water play is the thing that brings that person, out of their shell, and they interact with their peers in a way they haven't before. And that is an illogical thing that works. And forest school is full of these things, partly because we have this participant-led ethos, partly because we have this kind of relationship with like the natural space as another participant in the planning and in the delivery. And I think there is something there which is like, forest school is the least kind of hermetically sealed. If you were to go to the other extreme and go for a classroom, and yes, I know what the lighting's going to be like, I know what the displays are going to look like, I know what time the bell's going to ring, I know what time, and then forest school possibly at the other end where it's like, well, we eat when we're hungry, and maybe that will throw up some different things, and the weather is always changing, and who knows if that tree's going to drop a limb and we weren't expecting that, and all these kind of bits of creative chaos that I think really add to the experience, because we are constantly being given illogical things that work, and we are more open to that as forest school leaders than we might be as classroom teachers. This episode of the Forest School Podcast is brought to you by Chris Holland's Nature Connection. Are you looking to deepen your connection to the natural world? We're thrilled to share the Plant of the Week collection by Chris Holland, a long-time friend of the show and someone we've been lucky enough to call a peer and friend for many years now. This beautifully crafted A4 book is packed with 54 plant profiles, seasonal insights, poems and proverbs that bring each plant's story to life. It's a brilliant resource for anyone on their forest school leader training journey, or for sharing with parents and support staff who want to expand their nature knowledge and feel more confident in the great outdoors. What's more, it's perfect for forest school sessions, helping you to explore plants likely growing right near your site or home, all while nurturing curiosity and connection with nature. Each profile even includes QR codes for instant access to even more information, ideal for on-the-go learning. Chris has poured decades of passion and expertise into this collection, and we know it'll be a valuable companion in your work or play in nature. And because he's a friend of the show, we've got something very special for you to use. Use the discount code FORESTPOD at checkout and save 15% when you order through the link in our show notes. Don't miss out. Whether you're a seasoned forest school leader or just starting your journey, the Plant of the Week collection is a treasure trove of inspiration and knowledge. So head to the link in the show notes, grab your copy, and remember to use the code FORESTPOD for 15% off. Thanks again to Chris for sponsoring this episode. So that's one of the things that I want to take from this book. He talks quite a lot about, because he's kind of talking about marketing, there's an interesting point where he talks about things as a sign of pre-work commitment and trust. And the example in the book, he's talking about shops that sometimes have, established, 1954, or the idea that like certain brands have reputations for quality. And so he talks about if you were going to go, let's say the example is, I think in the book is a batch of TVs are made and they're pretty shoddy, but they are made by Panasonic in the Panasonic factory. Now, Panasonic has a lot more to risk reputationally by putting those TVs out into the market than does completely nameless Asian brand. You go on Amazon and you see that they are the whatever company name is selling TVs, and they are a third of the price. And thinking about reputationally what people have got invested is a marker of trust. You kind of buy things from trusted companies because you know that they have built up that trust over a long period of time. They have done the and he talks a lot about, and then the pivot he talks to about is like training and accreditation, which is where this becomes relevant, I think, to forest school. And Rory talks in the book about there are certain jobs where he talks about London black cab drivers and kind of says that they have to do all these rigorous tests. They have to learn all every road in London. They have to know all the routes, all these things. And part of that is that the training that they go through is a marker of when you get in the taxi in a black cab, you know that the person who is operating that taxi has gone through that training. They're not just doing this as a 3-month stopgap gig. They have shown through pre-work that they are committed to this as a thing. They are not just kind of, and this is where Uber goes kind of the other way, where people are potentially doing Uber on and off for months. They don't have to do that much. Their commitment is way lower. The accreditation of black cab drivers is the reputation that you're partly buying when you go into the transaction. Now, why is that relevant to forest school? Because I think that is something that comes up quite a lot. Now, obviously, there are huge barriers to a lot of forest school training, time, finances, all those things. So I'm by no means saying that like it's the be all and end all. The only way to establish trust is through training. But I do think it's an interesting position to explore how much a level 3 qualification in forest school shows a commitment to a pedagogy, shows a commitment to an ethos that and whether we as a community signal that to our customers, to our participants, that look, hey, look, I've done part of the course being, a year long, maybe more depending on how you want to do it, and the amount of work that goes in it is part of what we are showing ethos wise when people bring their children to our sessions, when participants come and join in. We are signaling through our accreditation, through our training, that hey, this isn't something we're just doing with no thought. This isn't something, we have invested, like I have invested my own time into training for this. This is not something that I'm just doing on a whim. And so that's, I think, very interesting, whether we as a community are advertising that enough, whether more could be made of that level of commitment to go. And that's where, again, I think there's differences with the type of training that people do. Is watching a 5-minute fire lighting video the same marker of commitment? That training, I'm not saying that it does or doesn't equate to skill, but commitment is, I think, a very interesting thing to explore. Are we marketing that? Are we talking to our participants about that in the most beneficial way? And also how that then talks about reputation, and he goes on to talk about repeat business. So Panasonic wants repeat business. Black cab, if you have a bad experience with a black cab driver in London, you're less likely to go and use those kind of services again. And I think that's super relevant for Forest School because of this long-term ethos. One of the biggest markers of trust and of quality is if you are actually able to deliver a long-term provision. And this kind of interested me because I was thinking about the thing that we did as a company when we wanted to encourage that long-term commitment, was we asked people to book longer and longer blocks. Now, I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do, and certainly it's a route that lots of people take. But it's interesting to look at that and go, so the only option I gave them was to deliver a long-term thing. So the amount of repeat business was kind of limited. It was kind of down to well, people will always come for 12 weeks, or people always come for this because that's the thing I've set them to. What is it, a different or a better marker if you're do you know what? So the system that we have now is rolling monthly direct debits, like a gym. But people still come for months and months and months at a time. Nobody comes for 1 month. And that's more interesting to me, thinking about this as repeat business, is I'm not tying people to a long-term thing. I'm offering them a long-term thing. And the fact that they keep coming back is my repeat business, is my marker of quality, to kind of go, that's very interesting, that people are choosing to have repeat business rather than being forced to make bigger and bigger purchases. That's something that I thought was interesting. And then it was kind of just kicking around this idea and thinking, okay, so that's what Forest School has in its benefits, this long-term provision, going on and on and on. And I was thinking particularly that for me, long-term now means years at a time. That is the relationship that I have with a lot of people, a lot of participants that come to our groups. Is long-term to me means years, not 6 weeks, not 12 weeks. It means years. And thinking about, that's years plural. Now, if I think about the experience I had as a teacher, even though I was only a teacher for a couple of years, there was always that undertone of well, you're not going to gel with all those kids, but it's only a year. And likewise for the kids, they're often being, well, Mrs. So-and-so is a teacher in year 3, but it's only a year. And now Steiner Education, I know, has teachers that go up and up and up, but is that a signal of non-commitment? Is having only a year-long commitment with a child a signal of non-commitment? Because, let's say it's a year, but actually a school year is 9 months. But actually, a school year is not 9 months; it's 40-ish weeks, depending on where you are. Okay, but you take a lot of those times off for, with X, Y, Z, other things that are going on, and suddenly you realize, well, it's only a 30-week commitment that you're actually going to be having a relationship, and that's an interesting marker to explore. What does that say about our education system, the mainstream education system, that we are in these kind of 12-month relationships and not necessarily encouraging anything longer than that? Maybe you do with a head teacher. Anyway, I thought those kinds of things were interesting. There's a bit in this book where he's talking about placebos, and that we placebo ourselves, and that we like placebos. So lots of the examples in the book are that medicine that is at a higher price point is more effective, even if it's the same medicine. Raising the price raises the efficacy of that thing through a placebo effect. Changing the packaging to make it look more specified. Nurofen apparently got in trouble because they had different packaging for their products. Nurofen, one said for period pains and one said for migraines, and different colors, different packaging, same product inside, and they were taken to court. Now, The issue being that it was the same products and they were marketing differently. However, with the placebo effect, they were actually more effective at period pains or at migraine, because the placebo of the, you know, of the packaging made it more effective. So that's very interesting, thinking about how does that apply to forest school. It's talking about things that we set up. Particularly, he talks about the army, and that the army placebos itself all the time, in that it tries to create placebo conditions for bravery. Flag waving, uniform marching, regimented things are potentially there because they create a situation in which we are sort of retrospectively going, this must be a place in which I am brave, rather than being brave to get into those places or to be into those places, which is very interesting to think about. Then, okay, so what do we placebo at forest school? What do we do at forest school? You know, it's probably not bravery. Maybe it is if we're talking about risky play and social emotional risky play and things like that. But maybe, do we placebo ourselves in forest school with towards relaxation or towards non-judgment? Is there anything in our spaces or in our language that is placeboing ourselves towards being less judgmental, more unconditionally accepting? That kind of was interesting to me, because I always think that's it's acknowledging that those things work even if we don't understand fully why they work. Does putting blankets out on all of the benches make people feel calmer? Yes. Do I understand why? No, not particularly. The blankets kind of, they make the seats a bit softer. Maybe they make the place look a bit more inviting, but that's not really going to be a reason that people's emotional behavior is different. So kind of identifying what placebos are in place in your setting, in your space, in your delivery, and thinking about how that stuff is affecting your sessions. One thing that did make me think about was he talked about scarcity and foul taste as things that have a placebo effect in medicine. And he posits the idea. So the scarcity being, the less abundant it is, the harder it is to get a medicine, the more effective it is. The more bitter tasting medicine is, the more we kind of internalize, and as a placebo go, it must be good for me because it tastes so bad. And I think there's something very interesting there. I'm not a huge believer in herbal medicine, but I do think there's something interesting about the placebo effect of herbal medicines, because I do think that can be real and can be very effective. I'm not saying herbal medicines don't help people, but I think sort of exploring is the marketing for herbal medicines quite often, this is extremely hard to get. It comes from deep in South America. It's only grown on the mountainside where a llama spits, in the full moon. Is that scarcity placebo? Is the bitter taste that comes with a lot of stuff, is that placebo as well? And just kind of going, that's very interesting. Does this stuff go in cycles? Is that why herbal remedies? Because once the market picks up and things become easier to get, navel wart, let's say, as a thing, and then suddenly all the shops stock navel wart remedies, and so the scarcity placebo starts to taper off, and something new needs to come in, something new that's harder to get in the UK or harder to get in the States or wherever it is. And so that's why we see these waves of superfoods coming in and out, is because the scarcity placebo is a large part of that. I think that's very interesting, but that's not necessarily to do with forest school. One of the things that Rory talks about in this book. Now, I don't agree. I should say at this point that I find Rory's book very interesting. Digging into a lot of the examples he gives, they're not always factually based. Some of them are kind of folk tales or urban legends, but I think if I take his book as a story and use the examples he gives more as metaphors for the point that he's trying to illustrate, rather than straight up intellectual facts and anecdotes, then I think it sits very differently. One of the things that I think was interesting was he was talking about the ability that humans have to develop heuristics and decision-making heuristics. And so heuristics being not extremely clinical, X equals Y, if this, then that, these kind of logical functions, but developing this kind of skill of like intuition and of, kind of like, I've got a feeling about this, or actually I kind of make a judgment call. And I was thinking about how, again, if I compare the kind of spectrum of a very clinical space, like a classroom where all the decisions are intentional, and the wall space and the decorations are intentional, and the time the bell goes ring, all those things, and the encouragement there that people should develop very rigid sets of rules, very rigid sets of like, if behavior is X, then outcome will be Y. If behavior is Z, then consequence will be A. If you work hard, then the result will be a better life. If you say unkind words, then the outcome will be this. And how all the kind of behavior systems and all of the methodologies that are in some of those spaces kind of reinforce this very clinical, like, if you do this, then this will happen. And that sometimes that can then be challenging when people leave that space, go into, in all the air quotes in the world, the real world, and find that things aren't as clear. Things aren't as clear cut. That can be a real bumpy landing for people when they leave home for the first time, is good things happen to bad people. Or, it doesn't matter if you are the first one to hand in your essay at university, because the things don't apply like they did in earlier education. Your friends will have different emotional reactions to things than you did, because of your background or because of your understanding of different things. And I was thinking about how forest school, I think, is such an incredible space for developing these kind of heuristics, because there is something, I think, about, people often use the example for risky play of jumping off a log, but every log is different. We don't teach people, okay, here's the safe way to jump off any log. If log is more than 1 meter, then log, Now, there are times where I have seen those kind of things employed in forest school, like, you may only climb as high as this, you may only do X, particularly things around safety. Fire lighting might have some very strong rules, but for the most part, I think forest school is a space in which you are encouraged to develop heuristics, to encouraged to see the gray area and explore. Well, if depending on the leader, kind of going, well, yeah, I guess maybe let's explore this. Let's do our own risk assessment of this specific scenario. Let's do our own calculations about, like, what does this tree look safe to climb? Let's not go for, like, the rule is the branch must be bigger than 2.5 inches, and then does that apply into the real world? Maybe not. Are we in a space where we have the time and the resources and the ethos to encourage people to develop heuristics, which could benefit them as a skill? Developing heuristics is everything you do. Heuristics is how you choose a plumber. You get vibes, you look at prices, but you also look at other things. You get reviews. It's not true that most expensive plumber is best plumber, or cheapest plumber is best plumber. These are heuristics that you have to develop. And so, thinking back, I'm like, well, forest school is this space where we can develop heuristics. And I really hadn't explored that idea of heuristics and intuition, and thinking about, are we uniquely positioned as forest school leaders to be, putting that stuff across? And lastly, for this, I wanted to explore something where Rory talks about scenting the soap. Now, the example he's talking about is that soap was invented, and that people understood, in the UK, in the Western kind of world at least, the benefits of it. The scientific community understood the benefits of it. However, the use of soap massively took off when people started adding scents to the soap, and the marketing around using soap became around social impacts. It became around, if you use this, you will smell better, you will be more appealing to your peers. And the actual benefit was that people died less. They were more healthy. The germs, all these benefits of soap. I'm not going to list the benefits of soap, but But interestingly, the uptake of it was the scent. Now, I really wish I had, and I will when I next get a chance to podcast with Wem. I will go back to this idea, because there's something I'm increasingly aware of as Forest School has kind of reached. It's been growing as an idea. I've been doing this 10 years, and I've seen growth and growth and growth, and the understanding and the general population of at least the UK understanding what Forest School is, or being aware of it in some way, is definitely on the up. And I think what is now coming with that, now that there's an established, I was going to say understanding, and that's not quite right. There's an established presence of Forest School. And so the move now, in some ways, seems to be to, as we saw by Wem and I going to the Forest School Research Symposium, which was incredible, is people exploring the real nitty gritty, the science of it. And we've talked in recent episodes about this kind of like different ways to study quantitative and qualitative, and the ideas that you can study things through kind of hard data and numbers and graphs, and this one up 2 points, or you can look at qualitative stuff. You can look at the words that come out. You can look at the interviewing people and themes that arrive. And I was thinking about this idea of scenting the soap and how it relates to that, because I personally feel there is something coming, which is that we are going to potentially unscent the soap. Now, what do I mean by that? So, unscenting the soap for Forest School, I think if we dig too deep and become too like the opposite of holistic, it's a holistic practice, but the study of it could potentially become non-holistic, could become very specialized. And what might happen there is that people say, well, the storytelling is not the bit that moves up literacy. Well, even if people aren't exposed to any kind of like seasonal change, then we still see an improvement in mood. Or we still, anything like that, where we're kind of taking away or stripping back things to go, well, what's the actual bit? What's the bit that moves the needle? Now, obviously, with that comes all this kind of baggage around, like, well, what is the needle measuring? Is the needle measuring literacy skills? Is the needle measuring mental health? What metric of mental health? Is the needle measuring school attendance? Any of these things. And I think there is something about scenting the soap here, which is that Forest School as a practice, to me, the scent of Forest School is, and I say this with the utmost like reverence and earnestness, the scent is woo woo. The scent of Forest School is to me, in my particular setting, the scent that we put on this stuff is the Celtic wheel of festivals. It is the storytelling. It is the carvings that we have put into the trees, the dead trees, not live ones. It is, the ornaments that we put and decorate and different things. It's the funny songs that we sing. That's the scent. That's and sometimes calling things placebos then makes you feel like, oh, we should get rid of that because, but that's the stuff that impacts it. Maybe it's the time out in nature and it's the pheromones of the trees coming off, and that actually influences on a biological level the happy serotonin in people's bodies. Sure, maybe it is, but that's not the scent that sells this soap. The scent that sells the soap is non-judgmental approaches, is bit of woo, bit of stories, bit of all that stuff. And I think it is integral to what I think Forest School is that stuff, because that is the stuff that's going to go with people. That is the stuff that's going to stay with people. That is the packaging. If we talk back about the Nurofen thing, that is the packaging that this box comes in. And what's in the box maybe is up for debate. Maybe we'll never know what's exactly in the box because we don't, humans are complicated beings. But thinking about this book, Rory Sutherland's Alchemy, and thinking about, the packaging that we put in. Does the packaging that you're putting in have placebo effects? Absolutely can. But whether the packaging is the bit that's getting studied, Now, we went to the research symposium, and there were lots of studies there, lots of stuff being done about, the impact of time outdoors, the impact of, handcraft, the impact of things. But no one was necessarily, to my knowledge, looking at the impact of the marketing message. And I think the marketing message is just as important as the delivery in some respects. Do I actually think that? This is where I wish I had Wem to check in with. I think there are certain scenarios where the packaging and the marketing is as important to people's experience as the actual delivery. And so that's how we're going to leave it today, is thinking about that and thinking about, okay, so where is your marketing? Where is your stuff? What are you scenting your soap with? Because I think that's something that we're doing. That's part of what we do as leaders, is scenting this soap. Thank you very much for listening, guys. If you've been watching, I have no idea whether there's been stuff going on in the background. Thank you very much to today's sponsors. Thank you to everyone that's on Patreon. Don't forget, you can now gift. I just see this. We got an update. You can gift people Patreon subscriptions. So if you want to gift someone for Christmas a Patreon subscription to the Forest School podcast, you can do that. You can head in. You can set people up with a gift subscription so that they can get access to all the behind the scenes stuffs we're doing. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Fingers crossed we'll have Wen back with us next time. See ya. Bye. Stay wonky.